Welcome to the Lunch and Learn program. My name is Joanne Beewig. I'm president of the board of directors of the Red River Valley Asperger Autism Network. The format for today is a brief overview of the topic and then a question and answer session. We're privileged to have on our panel today an adult with Asperger syndrome and professionals, and then we have parents as well. I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. John, would you like to start?
Sure. Hello, my name is John Fody. I have Asperger's syndrome. I'm able to give you that perspective. I'm able to show you what it's like through my eyes. I'm able to walk you through my life. I am a professional public speaker that shares this here and there, and I'm also the video editor for this organization, and I'll also be putting this on YouTube.
I'm Heidi Cummings. I'm Director of Special Education for Fargo Public Schools.
And I'm Jolene Shu. I'm an Area Service Coordinator for Fargo Public Schools.
Thank you. Before I introduce our presenter, I also want to introduce one other special guest today, and that's Tricia Page, who is our, I didn't warn her this, she's our North Dakota State Autism Coordinator, and does a really fine job of making sure that the services and programming that we need is made available to our state. So thank you for coming. Our presenter today is Dr. Barbra Stanton with Prairie St. John's, and I will let her introduce the topic to you.
I think I know everybody. This is fun. And I promised John that I was going to stay here so I wouldn't wander out of the video range. So this is going to be really tough for me because I usually walk a lot. So forgive me if I look uncomfortable, but I'm going to do my best. So today we're talking about positive behavior supports. And how many of you have heard, either at school or through a provider, we're going to develop a positive behavior support plan? Very common. So what we wanted to do today is to talk a little bit about what positive behavior support plans are all about. So I put this cartoon up, and it says, Billy's been in timeout 43 times already this month. It must be working really well. Because this is really kind of what I get at a lot of meetings sometimes. We talk in terms of numbers, and often think that that's really what's going to inform our intervention or what's going on, are those tallies of the behavior. Positive behavior support plans are really different. What is a positive behavior support plan? It's a comprehensive, research-based approach to behavioral support for kids who have challenging behaviors. And a lot of times there's a cliche that says, treat the symptom, ignore the disease. And this happens across the board, not just with mental health issues or with kids with developmental issues, but also in the medical world too. That oftentimes you'll go in and people will be taking a look at what are the symptoms rather than really what's underlying those symptoms. So it's really important that we take a look at the why things are happening and really get that very clear perspective so we know exactly what to develop an intervention about. A positive behavior support plan really should determine what, where, when, and how the behavior occurs, as well as why it's going on. And that's a really important question. And I know that some of you who meet with me get really annoyed with my, well, why do you think that happened? Why do you think it's going on? Well, what happened before that? Well, what happened before that? Well, what happened last week? And it's really important that we do get that very clear understanding about behavior. So some of the questions that often come in is, why can't somebody sit still? Why is this child doing some negative or self-injurious behavior? And we have to know the function or the purpose of those behaviors. There are 4 main steps to a positive behavior support. Again, kind of being repetitive here, is identifying the purpose of challenging behavior, teaching alternative responses, consistently rewarding the behaviors or the things that we want to be seeing the child doing, and minimizing the physiological, environmental, curricular factors that can trigger the challenging behavior. Again, all going back to the why is this happening. It can be used for individuals, it can be used for classrooms, it can be used in organizations. It is something that can really be applied either, again, on an individual basis or in a classroom basis. Positive behavior support has been adopted by a number of different departments of public instruction across the nation, including Minnesota and North Dakota. Also, North Dakota Department of Human Services has adopted the format or framework of positive behavior support. Well, when we talk about autism spectrum disorders, I always get the question, well, what about applied behavior analysis? Because how many of you have read articles that talk about ABA being the gold standard of behavioral interventions for kids on the spectrum? When you read literature, that's a lot of what it talks about. So I really wanted to take today as an opportunity to sort of take a look at the difference between positive behavior support and applied behavior analysis. And the information that I got for these, I'm happy to provide the references, but a lot of it came from positivebehaviorsupport.org, which is a key website. And there's also a primary ABA website where they also contrast ABA to positive behavior supports. Applied behavior analysis has been around for a long time, and for anybody who was back in college in psychology in the 70s, as I was, this is really what we spent a lot of time talking about, and a lot of times we called it behavior modification. And it's what we looked at and learned about in terms of being able to help kids change behaviors. It's a theoretical orientation, and I think one of the misunderstandings that a lot of people have about ABA is the assumption that it is a specific intervention. It's a theoretical framework, and there are a number of different interventions that can come out of applied behavior analysis, but it's not a one thing, or this is what we do. It's a lot more complicated and a lot more to it than we're just going to do ABA. A lot of times, ABA is a single subject design. It's focused specifically for one child, and positive behavior support really evolved out of ABA. So positive behavior support was developed in the 1980s, primarily due to changes in the field of psychology and child development that included some ethical concerns about some of the practices that had been inherent in applied behavior analysis, such as the use of aversives, using interventions without including the individual, and also there was a big movement in the 80s for sort of the inclusion movement for individuals with disabilities. So positive behavior support really grew out of that movement. Positive behavior support differs from ABA. One, it does not endorse or use aversive techniques. And unfortunately, yes, there are still some facilities in the country that do use electric shock as part of an aversive therapy. They will use spray bottles with ammonia or lemon juice. More commonly, what I've heard of around here is the use of hold or restraint or seclusion and timeout as an aversive technique. It focuses on the relationship. Positive behavior supports focus on the relationship and the interactions between people. Really, a key element, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, is it takes a look at the function of the behavior. Also takes a look at modifying the environment rather than focusing specifically on the changes that that individual needs to make. It focuses on how can we work to alter the environment to make it one that the child can be successful in. It focuses on natural supports in the community, including families, other providers, other activities and services and supports. Does not emphasize pathology. We're not looking to diagnose. We're not looking for that there's something wrong with this child. We're looking for how can we take a challenging behavior and help a child become more successful. Includes lifestyle changes to improve quality of life for the individual. It has a lifespan perspective and consumer-driven rather than expert-based. And again, I think one of the things that I really appreciate about everybody who's here today is that perspective that we really do look to our experts, like John, and like the children that we're working with, to be able to get their perspective on what it is they need in order to be successful. So the key is a functional behavior assessment. Don't you love that kid? I know that kid. There are some challenges in getting a good functional behavior assessment. First of all, who's doing the observing, reporting, and what lens they are doing. It's kind of interesting because sometimes I will talk to people who have had the same observation of a child who have very different perspectives or ideas about what happened with the child or the meaning behind the behavior or even the intervention and what needs to happen. It's challenging because sometimes it cannot be as comprehensive as it needs to be. People coming in from different disciplines are going to have different perspectives on the same behavior. A speech and language pathologist, an occupational therapist, a mental health therapist, a teacher, a parent, a grandparent. Everyone can have different ideas about what is behind the behavior. It needs to be thorough and look at multiple possibilities. That ability to throw out different hypotheses about I wonder what is going on is really also a key to a really good, valuable functional behavior assessment. Oftentimes the challenge is that it may not be clear enough. For example, I've seen functional behavior assessments where the function of the behavior is seeking attention. And again, I know I drive some people kind of nuts at meetings, I acknowledge that, by saying, but why are they seeking attention? To me, that's still a behavior, it's not a function of the behavior. What attention are they seeking? From who? Why? Is it because they don't know how to make friends? And so they have some inappropriate or challenging social interactions? Is it because there's something sensory going on and so they're trying to avoid what's happening? So there can be a lot other reasons for something that is considered to be a function of the behavior. Same with escaping and avoiding. What, why, what's going on? Sure, they're trying to avoid, but what is going on and why are they trying to avoid it? Is it because maybe they don't understand the instructions? Is it because they're processing the information too slowly? So we have to know the function of the behavior. What is the child trying to tell us? There are a lot of reasons for functions of behavior. Undiagnosed medical issues. I had a guy who was in middle school, and a child who typically had not created any challenges in his classroom at all, and now all of a sudden he was pushing other kids, he was talking back to his teacher, he was crawling under his desk, not participating. And so the idea was, well, we're going to put a reward system in place for him. Didn't work. Actually made things worse. And so he came in and his mom and I were talking, and to make a long story short, I suggested that he go to a medical doctor, and it turns out he had acid reflux, something that was newly developed. So he was in a lot of pain, but didn't know how to express that he was feeling that kind of pain. So a prescription of Prilosec later, and all the behaviors were gone. And the reason that the reward system didn't work is because it got him more frustrated, because he really, really wanted those rewards, and he just couldn't do it. So the more he tried and the harder he tried, the less successful he was. It's something that really wasn't his control. We talked to lots of kids who have headaches because of fluorescent lighting, who don't always know that it's the fluorescent lighting that's giving them a headache. I know I'm really cranky when I have a headache. So those are things that can go in, and that's why we need to continuously dig to understand what's going on with kids. A number of the kids that we've seen in our programming are kids who have had undiagnosed attention deficit or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Ask a child who is hyperactive to sit on the square in his classroom for an extended period of time, not going to happen. No matter how many rewards you try or consequences you give, it's just not going to happen. Other things can be medication issues, and sometimes medications are given and they can be extremely beneficial. Sometimes medications can have side effects, and there can be side effects that do make kids more aggressive, can really impact their irritability or their mood, lots of different issues. I spend a lot of time talking to parents about going back and talking to their prescriber about whether or not this could be a side effect of the medication. Medications that aren't at therapeutic levels can also create side effects and issues for kids. Sensory issues, I think we all know about those. Lagging skills, things that they just don't know. I don't hear it as often as I used to, but when I go to meetings, you're so smart, why can't you? You know, you can do algebra on your head. How come you can't make it through a gym class without hitting somebody? Doesn't have the skill. Totally different skill set is required for doing algebra in your head than trying to get along with somebody who's annoying you. Abuse and neglect. Sadly, there are children who have home lives that are horrendous, and there are things that happen that should never happen to children. So when children are coming into school, and this is what they're experiencing at home, Whether we have a child who's on the spectrum or a neurotypical child, we are likely going to see behaviors. And a lot of times these are things that kids don't want to talk about. So again, it's very challenging for us a lot of times to take a look and really broaden that lens outside of that behavior at school as to what else might be going on for that child. Hungry or tired? Holy smokes, this is a big one. I know when I'm hungry and tired, I'm not very pleasant to be around. It's hard for me to concentrate, might be a little bit more irritable. Those are the days I'm apologizing to our support staff a lot because I'm not always sort of as happy or as polite as I should be. Lack of self-confidence or embarrassment, hear this a lot from kids. They would rather hit somebody and get in trouble than be embarrassed for not knowing what to do. And for some reason, that being in trouble is more acceptable than feeling like you don't know what you're doing right. Communication issues, misunderstanding, they can't express their needs or let us know what's going on. So PBS plans can include, and I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, just altered classroom environment, sensory needs, room configuration, traffic patterns, predictability, trying to keep things predictable for kids, using schedules, trying to minimize changes. I use a term a lot called flexibly structured. Kids do well with structure, but we also need to be flexible when we have to make that change on a moment to meet the needs of a child. Clearly state expectations, increase choice making, including the student in planning, adapt curriculum, how instructions are given. Some kids who learn really well from lectures, some kids who learn really well from reading, or a combination of the two depending on what the class is. And sometimes you go class by class to help understand the learning style. Focusing on positive behaviors, big fans of the nurtured heart approach to parenting here, and I know school districts are as well, and teaching replacement skills. You can't tell somebody to stop something if they don't know what to do instead. So, think the plan through. What are the risks and what are the benefits? And I've actually been at meetings like this, where you've got a number of different people who all have a different opinion about what should be happening to the child. Give him detention, he needs meds, lock him up, he needs an IEP, whom should I arrest? Keep the family together, remove him from the home. When we as a team are that split, we don't have the answer. We don't know what's going on, and we need to go back and really take a look at. So, since school has started, I've heard a lot of examples about plans that are in classrooms. And this is one, the family was nice enough to actually give it to me in writing, so I was able to do it. But this one I don't think is really all that unusual. So we have the list of class rules. Follow directions quickly, raise your hand for permission to speak, raise your hand to leave your seat, make smart choices, keep your dear teacher happy. I love the last one. And then there's a scoreboard that is in a visible spot in the room. When rules are followed, a tally mark is awarded to the smiley face side of the scoreboard. When rules are not followed or things are not going well, a tally is given on the frowny face side of the scoreboard. At the end of the day, if the smiley faces win, the classroom gets a reward. If frowny faces win, no reward is given. When a student breaks one of the 5 classroom rules, a white card with that rule number is placed in his or her card pocket. Students get to rehearse for 2 minutes the gesture for the rule they've broken at recess. At the end of the day, a note goes home asking parents to help students with additional rule practice. Purple cards are used to reward students following a rule. Green cards are used to help students practice a rule in class. What do people think? Speak. I see a lot of heads nodding. Let's start with the rules. The 5 rules. Any concerns with how the rules are written?
Very subjective.
Vague.
Very vague.
Very big.
You need specific.
Absolutely. How about follow directions quickly? Other than being vague, where might a student end up in trouble with that?
Define quickly. How fast?
How quick is it? And if you have somebody who's processing information more slowly, what is an acceptable level of quick?
Maybe not understanding what the directions were in the first place.
Right. Yeah. Smart choices. You know, I thought wearing my brown heels today was a really smart choice because they matched the outfit. Now that I'm standing up here, it wasn't such a smart choice. So smart choices can be defined very differently too. And what I might think is a really smart choice at the time might not end up being such a smart choice. So who makes that determination?
And people on the spectrum will be taking things very literally, and
Yep.
so we'll be having difficulty. Okay, what does this mean specifically?
How can I turn that into an equation so
Yeah.
I can determine what's a smart choice and what's not a smart choice?
I don't like the public embarrassment piece of it.
Oh, we'll move on to that. To the scoreboard part. Keep going, Joanne. What is it that concerns you about the?
Well, first of all, as a retired teacher myself, I don't think that's fair to hold a few people up before the rest of the crowd as failing. The child already knows if he's having some difficulties, but the kiddos on the spectrum will pick that one time out of the whole day that they didn't do something right and will get stuck on it and will ruin the whole day. I've seen that many, many times.
Or
It
that you
does.
have,
We fixate on
Yeah.
what goes wrong.
Or may get a whole bunch of you didn't do it right and still think their day was okay. It doesn't make sense.
no. And so there's that one child who might be really struggling, who's the cause of the class not getting.
And then that sets them up socially.
Yeah, unless the
Yeah.
teacher is really manipulating this, which then it's not fair. And it doesn't make sense.
One thing I like about it is asking the parents to get involved and do some role playing outside of the school, outside of the classroom. I think that's one positive thing that the child could learn something from and take back to school the next day.
I don't get the second paragraph though. If I as an adult am
It's too
having trouble
complicated.
understanding that, and there was actually a program in not your school district, in a different school district, that had a tally, a point system that for the life of me, for 6 years, I couldn't figure out.
It's just too complicated.
It was way, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's just
Way
too
too
complicated.
complicated. Yep. So, and again, a lot of this information I got from the PBS website, that rules have to be clear and make sense, and collective punishment is never appropriate. We want students to take individual responsibility for what's going on. We are not responsible for the group behavior. So it's important that I as an individual can monitor and watch my own behavior and not be concerned. And how many times do we say to kids, don't be concerned about what so-and-so is doing, yet this kind of invites that perspective. And the cross settings, and this is one that I think gets a lot of controversy back and forth. I think there are a lot of things that can make that beneficial if the parents are well informed, and it's not in terms of a consequence. But if I mess up at work, like I'm probably a week behind in my paperwork, I'm not going to punish myself when I get home. That's really not realistic. And if you have a child who messes up and I know mom and dad are going to know and I'm going to get consequenced at home, all bets are off. I don't care what I do for the rest of the day because I'm already in trouble. So it doesn't matter. A lot of this information, probably one of the folks who has a really good information about positive behavior support and an open understanding of kids is Dr. Ross Green. I put his website up here. He also has a school discipline survey to take a look at, and he's going to be working with some schools in the state of North Dakota. So pretty excited to see how that goes, because if you want a different idea about some of the things that he does and what he looks at. With that, I'm done talking, Joanne. So I'll let you do this.
Okay.
Any questions before I go sit down?
I have a question.
No, you don't get to ask.
Kind of comment. It seems when I've visited with educators or mental health behavior specialists, it seems like they know a lot of this, but they have a hard time keeping it in place. Like they they get you know, I almost wonder if we should have a positive behavior deal for the professionals. I mean, that they almost need a different, I don't know, a different sort of encouragement or support to keep up the carry through of this kind of theory as they lapse into that group of people with all these different responses.
Right.
And I'm just wondering if you comment on that in terms of what do we do for professionals to keep them on track here?
And I'm going to let Patty take that too and talk from the school perspective. I think I was trained in that sort of ABC model. You know, you do something, you have consequence, and here's the resulting. Never worked for me. And I found it to be very challenging and wore me out. Being able to look at things from a sort of detective stance of let's figure this out and let's be positive energizes me as a professional and makes really challenging work sometimes, because let's face it, there are a lot of challenges with these kids. But it's really nice when you have other people and you go to a meeting where people are positive and we're looking at the strengths and we're looking at the things that go well and different possibilities to support that child in being successful. That's an amazing experience and people leave energized rather than that, how are we going to punish him or what consequences. Although that's really, it's hard, Tim, because for a lot of people that's kind of an immediate reaction is, oh, we got a consequence for this. And being able to take a breath and a step back and say, what exactly are we? Because we never want to consequence or discipline a child who's for their autism or for their attention problems or for problems they're having at home or, you know, on and on and on. So that why is important. We struggle with it. I mean, we really do. But point well made. And it would be great to really be able to move forward. That's why I love the autism community so much. I mean, I don't think I've ever been around a group of people who really see things more success-based and more positive. I mean, it's really an amazing group of people to work with. So, Patty?
Yeah, and if I just want to rephrase and make sure that I understand the question. You're asking about just how better to keep teachers on track with a more positive plan, they themselves. Do I have that right?
Right.
And you know, and
Or
I think
other professionals.
Sure. And from the teaching realm, I think one of the things that Fargo Public Schools has done in this realm would be hiring that Asperger teacher coach that we have, and here's why I'm saying that. As a teacher, you can be approaching a classroom of 10 students, say as a special educator, all with varying degree of disability, or if you're a regular classroom teacher and you have 25, sometimes 30 students in your classroom, all with varying levels. I think it's sometimes that statement of you can lose sight of the forest for the trees that are in the way. And so having somebody else come in and observe what's going on in the classroom can help you take a step back, because many things happen. Teachers are faced with, you know, getting the curriculum out there, making sure that the standards are met, also making sure that the positive behavior reinforcements are going on, that sometimes I think things can just get lost. So being able to provide the teacher with somebody to come in and observe their classroom in a very non-threatening manner is one thing I think that we're finding. Also through Fargo Public Schools, whether it be special education or regular education, we're looking at review cycles of, you know, curriculum review. We go through that, and then we talk to teachers about what are good implementations of curriculum. And now we're realizing that we need to provide teachers with another professional alongside to help coach them along the way. That although they are teachers with a certificate in teaching, that doesn't mean that you can just go and learn a new curriculum. You're doing it with fidelity and making sure that you're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. So I think in the area of spectrum, like I said, being able to have other professionals come in and being able to observe and give helpful hints and making sure. I have a little placard in my office, well several, but one of them says presume positive intentions. I don't know that I didn't necessarily care for what I saw up there either. But if we presume a positive intention that the teacher was really trying to figure out a way to do this, doesn't mean that he or she was correct or that there couldn't be improvements, but being able to be part of a community, professional learning community, to be able to speak in a non-threatening manner, to say, you know, hey Joanne, you're that teacher, this may or may not be reasons why this would work so well. And we did it so quickly here in less than 2 minutes with a non-threatening manner, like you said,
Yeah.
in a way to look for positives. So I think that's part of that. And then also just that concept of opening up classrooms and realizing that teachers don't just shut their doors anymore and teach their class all day and then leave, that it is an open community. So I don't know if that really answered it, but working to try to support teachers more.
And I think everybody working together, and I think that's a point well made. I mean, I don't know anybody who ever has malicious intention.
Right.
Everyone
Right.
wants to see a child hurt or in any way, and most often they're surprised to realize that, holy smokes, I really didn't. You know, I did need to change my lens or open my perspective. But again, I think, and that's what I love about, you know, the school districts around here, is the openness to work with professionals. I know the other professionals are not always open and willing to work so closely with you folks, but I value that opportunity to collaborate, because we can all bring something different and unique to the table to help a child be successful.
And a family can always ask the district autism specialist to come to an IEP meeting or a school meeting, and each one of our local school districts has a person in that role. And it really does make a difference. If nothing else, it helps, that person can help put a different lens, as you said, Barb, on the situation, look at it from a different point of view. You also said something important, Patty, about the assuming intentions. And I think when we're looking at children's behavior, we need to also not ascribe possibly adult intentions to children's behavior. They don't have the experience base or the skill at manipulating that an adult might have. And so when they're doing something that appears naughty to us, we need to not assume that they're doing something negative on purpose.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's too easy sometimes, I think, to make that assumption.
And there can be just many things that can lead to when you think a student is acting out. Like Barb even said, if you have fluorescent light bulbs in the classroom that start flickering, I kind of fall apart. And I become very irritated, and I just kind of get stuck. And it may look like I'm not paying attention to something. It's just I'm having a bad reaction to it.
My grandson is 16 and has gone through an enormous growth spurt. I think he grew 4 or 5 inches in the last 5 months. And when he's in school in the mid-afternoon, he eats lunch at 10:30, we call it brunch. One of his teachers has snacks available for him. He gets crabby and irrational, will not reason with you because of that drop in blood sugar. He gets a snack, and within a short time he's back to himself again. So always looking for those other issues, I think,
Right,
makes a lot
yeah,
of sense.
other issues. Even just frustrating with, especially early on, difficulty with social skills. We might become frustrated with ourselves because we're not able to fully understand what something's going on. And our frustration may come across as being crabby or misdemeaning, but it's just we're a little frustrated with ourselves, and it's just those some issues that do come along with it.
Do you think some of that might also comes from wanting to do it right the first time?
Yeah.
And not being pleased with yourself?
Yeah, you want to do it right the first time. You get hung up on if you mess up, and other people have this, second nature, and they're having trouble doing this. You feel really left out, and early ages it can hurt self-confidence, and you just kind of act out with that. But over time, though, social skills are learnable. They are learned.
Thank you. All right, Does anybody have any questions about exactly how we do a functional behavior analysis or what the positive behavior intervention plan should be like in school? Or any comments from the panel?
Well, they can be at home, they can be,
What- That's the piece about it is that, yeah, we do these at home as well, and if what we do at home matches what happens at school and vice versa, that can be really beneficial as well. Do you have some?
Do you want to talk a little bit maybe about what it might look like when you come to a meeting plan and how we determine?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In the Fargo Public School District, we do our functional behavioral assessments as part of a student profile meeting. If a student has been referred for special education testing and behaviors are a concern, then one of the assessments that we would use, besides some other behavioral rating scales, would be a functional behavioral assessment. And that would be completed by a school psychologist. It could be administered by an ED teacher or by both of them and other stakeholders who are involved with that student. We have utilized our autism teacher coach as well, who has provided insight with some of the FBAs that have been completed. We also work with PCBAs that we contract with that have pulled in some insight as well through their observations. And so with that, that includes classroom observations across various settings, as well as parental input and what they're seeing at home. And really it's a multifaceted approach to writing the FBA, really getting down to the why, as Barb talked about. Why is this occurring? You know, what is it? What happened? What could have happened 2 weeks ago? Or what is driving this? And really getting down to the why and figuring out what best behavioral supports we can have in place. And that is written in our behavioral intervention plan or behavioral support plan. Considering those other factors we talked about, the sensory items. Are the child's basic needs being met? Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? Maybe they need a special plan of having a second snack later in the day because of an early brunch, as you talked about for your grandson. Just really figuring out what is triggering the behaviors and what can we best do to support it through this professional effort by multiple sources and people involved.
If I could add a little bit to that. One thing I've noticed in the last 8 years that my grandson has been in the Fargo schools is there's been much more awareness of the importance of the family input, because the very first functional behavior analysis he had, it did not meet any of those criteria. And I think, again, coming from the educator point of view, you don't always see the bigger picture for the child. You might see it just within the school setting, so there could be absolutely other things going on or issues that the parent is more familiar with how to handle with techniques that work at home that are important to bring there. And don't be satisfied if you're in an IEP meeting with a functional behavior analysis that doesn't ask you for your input.
Absolutely.
Because that's really important, and sometimes that can just get overlooked. But it's important to speak up and ask for that. The functional behavior analysis that was given in 3rd grade for my grandson said that he did poked a kid in line and then made noises that got the teacher's attention. And so the consequence was he was put in timeout. Well, that wasn't the consequence of the behavior. The consequence, as the family came in and said, he's wanting to get that child's attention and he doesn't have the social skills to know how to do that appropriately. And he's making noises to the teacher because she's not making the kid react the way he wants to. And it was completely different orientation than he's being naughty and causing trouble in line. So we've seen big change in that, and part of it was because we got involved with the situation and said, no, this is my take on this, and I'd like to put that into the mix. So it's really important to be able to do that. That's why we want you to have the kinds of information that you can refer to, that you can bring up at a meeting.
I have a question, kind of to flip this on its head a little bit. Our FBAs ever looked at from the point of instead of eliminating undesirable behavior, are they ever done to produce a desired behavior? For example, let's say a social skill is completely lacking, like Joanne is describing. Could you put an FBA in place to build social skills? And I'm assuming the answer is yes, but does it happen, is my follow-up to that.
I believe that yes, we would utilize that and talk about different curriculum that we can use to teach those skills. In our school district, we utilize a variety of social skills curriculum, the zones of regulation, social thinking, multiple approaches to help support that child to, as you said, gain that desired effect.
Right.
Yeah, and I would add that I think I know what you're asking. I would say that it probably does not happen too often that way, not that it couldn't. But the team educationally, when there's the different sections of the IEP, the individual education plan, in communication, there's a section, and those kind of things need to be discussed. And if there are gaps, if you hallmark what the communication style looks like for first an individual who has Asperger's, and then take it to that person themselves. If there is a gap in being able to understand social communication, then that in itself should indicate that there should be perhaps a goal and some direct intervention in that area. So you could also get at it from that direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what I'm thinking of is for parents, what we're concerned with is how do we get our kids, I have a personal experience with my own son, and he wants to make friends. He is a 7th grader. He still believes that the kid that he had lunch with in 2nd grade is his best friend. And what he's trying to do is make friendships in a middle school environment that's, middle school environment. And he does not recognize that child does not know him anymore. And the peers that he interacts with on a regular basis are just people in his path on that daily, and there's not an opportunity for friendship interaction there. And the school haven't seen that approach, but as I'm thinking through in my mind, that would be a perfect opportunity to address how do we increase behaviors that are going to set our children on a path for success, because we all know in a school setting that collaboration is essential, so you're going to need those social skills there. In the career environment, in the working environment, obviously you collaborate on a regular basis, but I'm just wondering if that's a shift in the paradigm that we could address.
I love that whole idea. That whole concept of let's develop a positive behavior plan developed on building those skills, the positive skills. I've seen that work really well with social thinking as a class. I wish our schools would come to a point where they would give kids credit for that, because it's a really, really important thing, and it would be good to have.
I agree, but I think that's difficult for schools sometimes, because I know I go to a lot of meetings too, where how do you balance academics with building executive functioning skills, building the social skills, and I think what you're saying, to build it in as a class and embed it throughout the day. I mean, that it's not just a 20 minutes twice a week pull out, but that it gets embedded in every class throughout the day. And I think that's hard for schools. I mean, I'd love to see it happen, but
teachers who know that's an issue will build it into their curriculum. I did that with him and said, yesterday I saw him ignoring a potential conversation opportunity at work, and and this teacher says, I can deal with that today, and did something in that particular class that built on how to do that. So keeping in touch with the teachers. But again, if you haven't had the in-service and the training about it, it's a little bit difficult too at the same time. But I think this is a really important point that we as families can bring to the IEPs is how can we do this? How can we build in these positive?
I've actually had a very good positive experience with the Fargo Public Schools this year in this realm. My son struggles with that same social skills stuff, and the team he's on and the people that I've been working with have been wonderful in working with him on that throughout the day. And of what I did was I wrote a letter to the team of who my son is and where his strengths and where his weaknesses are, and had a quick meeting with the team before the school year started. And it's been an awesome experience because he started middle school this year, and I thought we were going to have a complete disaster, and he's doing so well. And so I know that it is something that can happen, that whole integrating it throughout the day. And
That's great.
he's going to weightlifting, and he's doing things that I would have never guessed he would do. So kudos. It's been good.
And all of that as comments too, I just like to say as a parent, and I too have a child with a disability, so I understand what it's like to sit on that side of the table, and and even as a professional in it, it's different as a parent. It's just different when they're your own child. But to also say, Tricia, to yours too. So we've addressed many things and we've talked about it, but I as a parent didn't hear you mention how my child's weakness in the area of making friendships and what that means and what skill, I didn't hear how that was being addressed. Could you explain how you as the school would help address that? So whether it goes in as part of a functional behavior assessment, a discussion in the communications, that just ask those specific questions. These are my concerns, and I'd like to know what's the plan in school to address those. And that really brings the team back around to discuss and problem solve. It shouldn't be seen as confrontational at all. As a matter of fact, I think that's a wonderful question. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. To just explain how that would be addressed.
Yeah, and most times it's not. I've learned that a lot of times it's just unawareness that you're dealing with, and as soon as you speak up and share something, you usually get a positive response out of it.
John?
Yes, I'd like to address something else here. I just want to say that learning these skills and making friends and learning interaction skills can be learned. That I've come a long way since when I was in elementary school, a very long way. There was times where I wasn't able to decipher facial expressions. There was a time where I wasn't able to understand social interactions and how to make friends, and I've come a long way with that. And it can be through one-on-one teacher sessions. That early on I had classes in which they'd actually teach some social skills. I had some classes in which you'd have one-on-one subjects, and they kind of built in some social interactions throughout in those classes. So I had a math class where I just had myself and one teacher who would do math, another class, myself, language. They would also build in some social learning in there as well. And so that was very helpful for me. And just mingling with other people and seeing what other people are doing and then mimicking other people can also bring forward some ideas about how this is supposed to be and how interactions are supposed to go. And you can train yourself. You can set your own goals, and parents can also help teach them. The problem that arises is that it is assumed that everybody is born with the instincts of social interaction, but people on the spectrum are not. Now, because it is assumed, that is where problems arise. If it's assumed, it's not being taught. But you as parents, you as teachers, can teach these skills, and these skills can be picked up and they can be learned, and these students and these children can become very successful.
Marcia, did you have something you wanted to?
We offer class for credit at West Fargo High School. In fact, you can earn a full credit. There's 2 semesters. The first is a general social skills, all of those kinds of things that we're talking about. The second part of that class, the second semester that you would take, is more going off to college and work. How do you prepare for that? So we offer up to a full credit at the high school for just exactly those kinds of skills.
What do we do to start earlier, though?
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to start.
And they do. They have,
Preschool.
we're doing Nurtured Heart.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of our schools don't have at least somebody in them that is doing Nurtured Heart. we're, doing more and more and more of that. They're not perfect by any means, but they're getting there. What you said was wonderful, the communication between teams and assuming everybody's a team player, assuming that assuming those positive intentions goes a long way to having a team that's on the same page rather than a team that has adversaries or everyone with a different goal.
And
what you said was very important.
And I think another piece is understanding that an educator just may simply not be aware of that as a lighting skill, just may not have known that. And so bringing that to their attention is an important way to get that started. The other thing that I really like about what you brought up, Trish, is that functional behavior analysis tends to focus on what is going wrong and trying to initially eliminate a behavior and substitute something else in its place. And I really like the concept of let's look at what those lagging skills are and build the positive plan about how to increase those. I think that's a really important shift in the lens.
There are a lot of examples of functional behavior assessments out in the world of the internet. There are student-assisted functional behavior assessments. We use one in our full-day program. We had one. Ross Green's assessment of lagging skills is a great one that I've used quite a bit to be able to identify some of those thoughts. So it's a lot of information, almost information overload on some of this, so finding the one that works best can be a challenge, but it can also be very worthwhile.
Yes.
I have a question about the behavior plan. So
Speak up just a little bit louder.
if you've identified something, like one thing that my son struggles with is some sensory stuff, and you can't change that environment. Like, for example, he has a math class that the kids are all like crazy in, and it drives him to the point of meltdown. And he doesn't want to leave the classroom because that makes him look different than the other kids. So I'm struggling to come up with some sort of positive plan to deal with that sensory sort of thing that there isn't a lot of control over. That and the lights, that's another one.
Patty, do you have some ideas?
Well, I understand the question, and Matt, feel free to speak up. Matt is a school psych in our school district. You guys probably know that from various times he's been here. But you really do look at what you can try to implement and figure out. And so when you figure out that it's sensory, it doesn't mean that you necessarily know exactly what type. So we'll often tap our occupational therapist to go through a screening process for that, to help determine positive reactions or negative to make sure you don't. Because there have been times where I've put something in earlier years before really thinking about it, and it actually caused more of a problem, not, really just not playing it all the way. But there should be some sensory items that could come into that classroom, but I would be lying to you if I said that they would all just cover it and make everything all happy and 100% good, because you're absolutely right. I have a daughter who's autistic, and we had gone on a vacation, and I had said we knew not to try this one, their dining room. It was too busy, it was too crowded, it was too dark, lots of things that we just knew. So I was in the room with her, and she was still crying and whining and really fussing. And I couldn't figure it out, but I sat and I listened to the room. The lights were buzzing, the little fridge in there was buzzing. Things were just, the TV that wasn't even on was buzzing. What was I supposed to do about that? I could unplug the TV and I could unplug the fridge, but to sit in the dark, the whole time. So some of it is probably giving some coping items to make it through. But one thing that you two as parents should know, and we try to teach teachers about, is that just because you made it through that class as a person on the spectrum doesn't mean that you're not going to melt down in the next 20 minutes after that. So a function of what's going on, and to understand that maybe then to feed that sensory need big time afterward. And possibly beforehand, but it really does take a lot of intensive work to figure out what's going to work and what doesn't work, and what will make a difference positive and what's actually going to not make it good at all.
So perhaps some kind of a break after that class, which would allow
Right.
him away from that
Right.
kind of stress.
Yeah.
Yeah. The biggest struggle is he doesn't
Yeah.
want to be different.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's
Oh, absolutely. And so then
So-
even sometimes having that fidget in there for
yeah.
a middle schooler, I hail from the middle school level of teaching as well. Yeah, can be difficult.
So-
Yeah, especially in the middle school area where you want to fit in,
Mhm.
but, and that does create the self-confidence issues, especially people on the spectrum. We know that we're different, we don't exactly know why or how, or even if it's okay at that age. And so there are some self-confidence issues,
And it's never going to be perfect. It's
Right,
just finding
right.
some tools to get them
Right.
that might.
right.
I got students who, I ran a resource room, and I had students who, at the time, it was like Bakugan, and I'll be honest, I'm not knowledgeable in every area, but he got these Bakugan toys, and they were magnets. And of course, they were causing problems in the classroom, because other kids were interested in them as well, but they also just happened to have a little clicking noise to it. But it was good enough for him to know that he could hide them in my classroom in a secret hiding place, and because they were magnetic, they could fit on the back of my filing cabinet, and just knowing they were there, and then he could come back and kind of check in on them, was enough for him. We try it, and if it doesn't work, we try something else. And
Right.
if it doesn't
Yeah,
work, we
there-
try something else.
There are
Yeah.
different little tricks,
Yeah.
different little coping tricks that can just help. It's a way of shifting the mind with that. Yes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that we are out of time already. Does anybody have one last thing they want to say before we? Okay.
I just want to thank everybody.
Thank you
for
very much.
coming.
Please remember to